War clouds. Conflicting signals blur Russia's threat to Ukraine. We're at the White House. Peace prayers. The Russia-Ukraine crisis stirs a call for dialogue and respect for international law. Law enforcement and crime. A Capitol Hill initiative seeks to redress the movement to defund police. And trucker protest. A bridge reopens between Detroit and Ontario, but Canadian COVID mandate issues remain. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, February 14th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of Saint Cyril and Methodius. I'm Tracy Sable. The United States and other countries warned that Russia may invade Ukraine within days. President Joe Biden spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the weekend, warning him a further Russian invasion of Ukraine would produce widespread human suffering. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. President Joe Biden also told Russian President Vladimir Putin that the U.S. and its allies would impose swift and severe costs on Russia, but at the same time pushed for more diplomacy.
President Joe Biden not stopping to take questions, would only shout Happy Valentine's Day to reporters as he arrived back at the White House this morning. But the big question the world is asking, what is Russia going to do?
Mr. Putin is the only one who knows the answer to that, and I think that Mr. Putin knows he has ample capability at his disposal. He continues to add forces along that border with Ukraine and in Belarus, even just over the course of the weekend.
With 130,000 Russian troops gathered along Ukraine's border, joint exercises and training going on, fears of an imminent invasion, but a sign of hope too. It appears the Kremlin may be willing to keep talking. At an appearance orchestrated for TV cameras, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Lavrov arguing Moscow should hold more talks with the U.S. Meanwhile, exactly 4 years ago today, a massacre at a school in Florida. The father of one victim unfurling a sign from a crane today near the White House, criticizing the president for gun deaths on his watch. President Joe Biden tweeted this morning, on February 14, 2018, a gunman stole the lives of 14 students and 3 educators at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Today we mourn with the Parkland families whose lives were upended and stand with those working to end the epidemic of gun violence. Congress must act. And another father who lost his daughter that terrible day says he has a dream of ending gun violence in America.
And I have to tell you, it's 4 years later. But it doesn't feel easier to me today than it did 4 years ago. I miss my daughter terribly.
And separately tonight on this Valentine's Day, if you look behind me, you see the heart there. The First Lady, Jill Biden, put that on the North Lawn, along with the 2 cutouts of the White House pets. That's Willow and Commander. And if you can read the sign, I don't know if you can, but it says, 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love, and that, of course, is out of Scripture, 1 Corinthians. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Violent crime is increasing across the U.S. At the same time, thousands of police officers are retiring nationwide, leaving departments shorthanded. Republicans tell EWTN News Nightly that they blame the Biden administration for a lack of action and lax enforcement of existing laws.
And you have some movements in this country to defund the police, and some prosecutors simply don't want to prosecute what they consider smaller crimes, trespassing, even breaking and entering, and drug dealing. They won't even prosecute it. So naturally, you're going to have an increase in crime.
Republicans add the massive amount of drugs coming through Mexico is fueling violent crime.
The southern border crisis is creating a crime crisis in Montana because of Mexican meth that's flooding across the southern border. The Mexican cartels have command and control on the southern border.
The statistics are startling. Homicides in major American cities increased 5% in 2021 and are up 44% from 2019.
When you have soft on crime Democratic DAs that are releasing violent criminals on shockingly low bail, Those violent criminals go out and they commit violent crime yet again.
Democrat Congresswoman Val Deming served 27 years as a police officer before coming to Congress. She introduced a bipartisan bill, the Victim Act, backed by several police organizations. The bill would hire more detectives for departments, provide additional resources for processing evidence, offer additional training for officers, and ensure victim services are sufficiently staffed and funded.
When we take the time to talk to communities throughout our nation, particularly those in high crime areas, you know what they tell us? Those communities say, we want to fund the police. Matter of fact, we want to see more police.
Congresswoman Deming says communities and law enforcement must work together in a partnership to lower crime. Republicans add the criminals need to be held accountable. And joining me now is Amber Athey, Washington editor at The Spectator. Amber, welcome back. Always so great to see you. A lot to get to today, but first, let's start off with this spike in violent crime that we're seeing all across the country. In fact, just yesterday, 11 people were randomly stabbed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What do you think is causing this rise in crime, and how do we get this under control?
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of factors, one of which, of course, is the fact that a lot of communities are unfortunately telling police not to go after certain criminals. For example, in San Francisco, you see people doing these smash and grab and looting of stores without anyone allowed to stop them. They're supposed to just let them commit the crimes. And then you have these prosecutors across the country who have been installed by left-wing activists who have decided that they don't want to prosecute certain crimes and that they're going to reform the bail system such that criminals who have committed horrible crimes, who have long rap sheets, are being released back out onto the streets to commit more crimes. I mean, how quickly did we forget about the horrific Waukesha massacre, where this individual had 2 decades as a career criminal and yet somehow was released on a shockingly low bond, and then while running from the scene of another crime, managed to plow into dozens of people at a Christmas parade. It's absolutely horrific. And unfortunately, more crimes like this will happen if prosecutors refuse to do their jobs and make sure that criminals are held accountable when they break the law.
Yeah, on a different note, as you know, over the past week, a number of cities and states lifted their mask mandates. And just today, D.C. announced it's getting rid of its mask and vaccine mandates. That said, masks will still be required in schools. Your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I think it's really a shame that there are so many businesses in D.C. who have gone under because of the crazy restrictions in this city. And as someone who lives here, I haven't been going into D.C. because I don't agree with the vaccine mandate. And infamously, one restaurant, the Big Board, was shut down trying to protest this policy that's not based on any science, because we do know that people who are vaccinated can still catch and spread COVID. February 15th, the date that they're getting rid of this, is actually the date that they were originally going to make the restrictions even more severe. They were going to require people to have minimum 2 shots of the vaccine, and now they're going the opposite direction, and they can't really seem to point to any clear metric as to why they are reacting this way in terms of the virus. And all of their decisions that they've made throughout the pandemic have seemed to be political rather than based on any hard data.
Yeah, I want to stick with these COVID restrictions. Over in Canada, in Ontario, their most populated province there in Canada, they're going to relax their mandates on March 1st. This after massive protests by Canadian truckers who had blocked an international bridge. But those truckers aren't alone. Similar protests against these vaccine mandates are forming in other countries. Let's talk more about that.
Sure. The truckers have even suggested they're going to do this in the United States, starting in California and coming over to the D.C. area by March. Because of the success that they've seen in Canada. And I think all of this stems from the fact that public health officials said that they were going to try to make the lives of the unvaccinated as inconvenient and as miserable as possible. And the truckers basically called their bluff and said, well, we can do the same to you because we control the flow of goods in this country. And it turns out that the public health officials and politicians in Canada didn't like it so much when the tables were turned on them.
Amber, we have a little less than a minute left, but I want to quickly ask you this. Something else that's making headlines, the new developments in Special Counsel John Durham's investigation. What can you tell us quickly about that?
Sure. Well, I think that this is the culmination of multiple years of an investigation where we are starting to see more charges against individuals who were involved in the compilation of this Russian dossier that we now know was filled with Russian disinformation intended to divide America. And I think it's great news that the people who are involved in this will be hopefully held accountable, or at the very least, their involvement will be publicized, and the American people can finally have some answers about how all of this was able to happen against a duly elected president.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Amber, thank you so much. I always appreciate your time and analysis.
Thank you.
The Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople is calling for dialogue and peace to resolve the crisis between Ukraine and Russia. Patriarch Bartholomew I warns against a new war in Europe. More than 3 centuries of ties between the Ukrainian and Russian Orthodox churches were severed back in 2019 when the Ukrainian church became independent. Well, as we talked about earlier, an international bridge between Canada and the U.S. has reopened. The Ambassador Bridge was blockaded last week to protest Canadian vaccine mandates for truckers. The bridge handles nearly a quarter of all trade between Canada and the U.S., including a high volume of auto parts. It reopened for traffic last night after more than 24 were arrested. Meanwhile, Ottawa says that it will lift contested vaccine requirements in 2 weeks. In Britain, Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, has tested positive for COVID-19. Prince Charles had tested positive last week. The royal couple is vaccinated and is currently in self-isolation. The Prince of Wales had a prior bout with coronavirus in March of 2020. Super Bowl 56 is in the books. The Los Angeles Rams beat the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20. An estimated 70,000 people attended the game, and about 117 million more watched on TV. Authorities requested that fans, quote, celebrate responsibly after the game, but some revelers got out of hand. Los Angeles police did respond to some reports of vandalism. All right, well, turning from the Super Bowl festivities, that is, to today. And of course, today is St. Valentine's Day as we celebrate love and romance. Americans are expected to be very generous this year. The National Retail Federation forecasts nearly $24 billion will be spent for traditional tokens and gifts. Topping the list are candy, greeting cards, and flowers. Coming up, pro-life on campus. A special Valentine's Day conference anticipates a post-Roe America. Students for Life of America continues to find new ways to empower women to choose life. The pro-life organization launched its new initiative today called No Woman Stands Alone. The Standing With You website will connect mothers with resources that can support them throughout their pregnancies and beyond. And joining me now is Kristan Hawkins, president of Students for Life of America. Kristan, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Talk to us more about the event today and what inspired it.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for covering this issue. Today, we hosted the No Woman Stands Alone National Press Conference with pro-life leaders from across the country to say to women on Valentine's Day that now and after we enter a post-Roe America, no woman stands alone, and that the pro-life movement stands alongside of her. In fact, that is what we've been doing for decades, operating and sustaining thousands of pregnancy centers across the country and maternity homes. And that is what we advocate for every day on college and high school campuses that our 1,300 Students for Life chapters are on.
And you mentioned today the event was held on Valentine's Day. What's the significance there?
Well, you know, when I'm traveling to campuses across the country, and as we've certainly seen in the mainstream media's coverage of the ongoing Dobbs v. Jackson case, which we'll get the decision in June by the Supreme Court, which may very well reverse Roe versus Wade and send the decision back to the States, the commentary that we hear is that there's no support for women. Well, where are all the women going to go if they can't go to a Planned Parenthood and pay an abortionist to end the life of their child? And it's such a sad commentary because it's really the opposite of empowerment. This message that you hear from the abortion industry, especially young girls in high school and college campuses, that you have to choose, that you are forced to choose, in fact, between the life of your child and your education or your career goals. But it's really the pro-life movement, and this is what we've been doing for decades, that stands alongside of her. So she's never alone. This is what we've been doing at Students for Life for more than 15 years now, of meeting young women in crisis, walking alongside of her, physically going with her to her dean of students and to her professors' offices, demanding reasonable accommodation so she can stay in school while she's pregnant, or to make sure she doesn't lose her financial aid after she gives birth to her child. This is what we do. But yet the message needs to spread across the country. We knocked on 95,000 doors in the last 11 months at Students for Life. We've been knocking in doors in 20 cities. It's through our campaign for abortion-free cities. And it's not for a political candidate, but instead we knock on neighbors' doors and we ask them if they know the violence happening inside the abortion facility and if they know about the nonviolent alternatives located right there in their community. And some places in walking distance from their home. And I am so sad to tell you that more than 70% of the neighbors we speak with don't even know nonviolent pregnancy resource centers, pregnancy help centers exist in their community. And so as we as a movement prepare for a potential reversal of Roe in June, I'm firmly convinced that the number one thing we've got to be focusing on is raising the awareness levels of what we already do in the pro-life movement and making it known to the whole country that pro-life is pro-love. And within the pro-life movement, no woman should ever stand alone.
And besides, raising that awareness, what else is your group doing to prepare?
We're working on more than 41 campuses right now to change the actual policies on college campuses to be supportive of pregnant and parenting women. We're working with Christian universities to find a way to support women, come alongside women, to make sure no woman ever feels like she has to choose between the life of her child and her education.
Well, Kristan, unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming on and to, speaking with us about this event today. And of course, God bless you and all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for featuring this. I really appreciate it.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's personal secretary is defending the retired Pope's actions amid a German abuse report.
Wahrheitsgemäß in Berichterstattung wirklich nicht.
Archbishop Georg Gainswein spoke exclusively to EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser. The interview will air on a special edition of Vaticano tonight at 6:30, again at 11 p.m., as well as Thursday at 6:30 p.m. All times, of course, are Eastern. And you can also read more about the interview, which was conducted on Friday, by going to CatholicNewsAgency.com. Up next, a woman's touch. Inspiration for today from female saints and doctors of the Church. Pope Francis explains how the Beatitudes define the identity of a disciple of Jesus.
Beate voi poveri, perché vostro è il regno di Dio.
At his Sunday address, the Holy Father noted the Beatitudes declare that those who are poor, who lack many goods, and recognize this are blessed. Pope Francis also invited Christians to ask ourselves if we enjoy the disciples' readiness or if we prefer to embrace our own rigid mindsets. A conference taking place in Rome next month will look at the relevance of women doctors of the Church and patron saints of Europe in today's world. The event will highlight the message of these saints, their contributions to the Church, and how they can still inspire the pastoral work of the entire Church in the near future. Joining us now from Rome is Shahid Mobeen, professor of philosophy at the Pontifical Urban University in Rome. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Professor. Can you tell us a little bit more about next month's conference and why now?
Well, on the 7th and 8th of March 2022, the Pontifical Urban University, together with the Catholic University of Avila and the Institute for Advanced Studies on Women of the Regina Apostolorum University. These three Catholic universities are getting together to highlight the importance of the thought of these doctors of the church, women doctors of the church, and patrons of Europe, because these personalities have given an important contribution, not only in their historical particular period, but they remain a universal figure as the Catholic Church is.
And which saints in particular do you plan on focusing on?
Well, there are you see 6 figures, 6 personalities, 6 saints who we would like to highlight in particular. First of all, Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Lisieux, and Hildegard of Bingen. And along with them also the Saints Teresa Benedict of the Cross, known also as Edith Stein, and Bridget of Sweden. So these 6 saints, these 6 figures, not only in their thoughts, along with that also in their practical experiences, have lived the faith and the teachings of the church. They are based in the gospel in a way that they are example for the present challenges which the church is facing in the globalized world, which has got so many aspects to be dealt with. So they are a light also for all of us and for all the Christians, and I would say also for the humanity.
As we mentioned, you're a professor at the Pontifical University. Can you talk about how your work relates to the conference and also what you hope comes out of it?
Well, I teach philosophical anthropology in the Pontifical Urban University, and I try to get a better understanding of the thought of Edith Stein, not only of her philosophy, but also of her religious experience. She, through phenomenological instruments, paves also the path to individuate the terrain for interreligious dialogue, because the essential structure of human being, to which Pope John Paul II also gave a hint, a very important hint also in that direction in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, so much so that he mentioned also Edith Stein. The human being as essentially is the same everywhere in any context, in any nation, in any race, if you want to say, even if that would not be the right word, but that was a problem in the time of Edith Stein. So as I come from Pakistan, being a Pakistani Catholic, I must say that I try to build together with the bishops, together also with the other members of the communities from Pakistan who belong to other religions, other cultures also who migrated to Pakistan from Iran, from Afghanistan, from China. There are possibilities of making bridges so that there is a possibility of interreligious dialogue, dialogue of cultures, and it is not so easy because by constitution, Christians in Pakistan are discriminated, and in a public moment, they are also persecuted.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it. Shahid Mobeen, Professor of Philosophy at the Pontifical Urban University in Rome. Thank you again, Professor.
Thank you.
A Catholic athlete makes history at the Winter Olympics. Sarah Escobar is the first female athlete from Ecuador to compete in the Winter Games. She brought a stone with the word faith on it to Beijing as a physical reminder to keep God at the center of all she does. That's wonderful. And before we go, an update at the Olympics medal count here. Norway leading with 21 total medals, including 9 golds. Germany has 8 golds, followed by the U.S. with 7 golds, 6 silvers, and 3 bronze. The Netherlands and Austria round out the top 5. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.